All right, greetings everyone. The purpose of this video is to go over an example showing how to determine the amount of money owed for a credit card statement at the end of the month using what is called the average daily balance method, which you see mentioned here. And we're going to go through determining the average daily balance, using that to determine the amount of interest that is due, finding the total balance due, and then actually figuring out what the minimum payment is. So let's look at this situation. So suppose your credit card calculates interest using that average daily balance method, and that the APR interest rate is 20%. We're going to use the itemized billing statement given below to find each of those things I just mentioned. So let's start with finding the average daily balance. And to do this, we really approach this problem, or this part of the problem, in the way that you might expect, especially when you see that word average, right? So we know that an average, if we're finding an average of a set of numbers, we're taking all the numbers that there are and adding them up and then divided by how many numbers there are. Well, if we're looking for an average daily balance over a month, what we would need to know is the balance for each day, add up all those balances, and then divide by how many there are. Now, when you look over here at the statement, I know it's a little bit smaller than it was on the previous slide, but you notice that all of the information given here is in September. And as you see in the statement, we go from September 1st to September 30th. So that's this period of 30 days, which means we'd need balances for 30 days that we would find the average of. But notice that we're not giving the balance for every single day. Instead, what we're given are the points during the month at which the balance changed. So for example, if you start here on September 1st, there's an unpaid balance carried over from the previous month of $1,115. And that balance stayed the same until September 3rd. There was a charge on the account of $335. And so that is the first point at which the balance changed, which means that for those first 2 days of the month, so September 1st and September 2nd, that $1,115 was the balance. Okay. And as we're going through this average daily balance method, one thing I want you to know is that we're not going to write out the balances for all 30 days. So for example, I'm not going to start my calculation here by doing 1115 plus 1115, since those are the first 2 days. Instead, what we're going to do is shorthand that sum by taking a particular balance, which in this case would be 1115, the starting balance, and then multiplying it by the number of days that that balance was carried. So for example, again, that 1115 was carried on September 1st and September 2nd, so we know that it was carried for 2 days. And that's just a way to shorthand adding all of those things up. Because if you think about it, 1115 plus 1115, it's the same as just doing 1115 times 2. All right, so let's look at what happens now on the 3rd. So on the 3rd, there is a charge of $335. However, we need to keep in mind that that is not the new balance on the account, right? That's how much has been charged. And so what we need to do is figure out, how does that change the balance in the account? Well, as you might imagine, if we start with $1,115, we charge $335, that's going to increase our balance. So we would add those two numbers together. If you do so in your calculator, you'll see that we now have a balance of $1,450. So our new balance beginning September 3rd would be $1,450. And notice that we're then given that that balance is maintained from September 3rd up to the 11th. So we need to figure out then, how many days did we carry that balance? And there's a couple of different ways to do that. We can subtract those two and see that the difference is 8. So we can assume it was carried for 8 days. Or if you count it out, and you won't be able to see me do this, but I'm going to count it out on my fingers, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, that's 8 days. Okay, so let's move right along. So then on September 11th, we see that there was a charge of $830, which means that the balance on the account was again increased. So we'd add $830 to the amount we're sitting at right now. So that 1450 plus 830, that's going to increase our balance to $2,280. So we'll add that here into our calculation. And then we're going to multiply by the number of days that that balance was carried, which in this case, that's from the 11th to the 15th. If we again count that out, 11, 12, 13, 14, because the balance changes on the 15th, that is going to be 4 days that that balance was carried. And then we'll just continue on from there. So the next thing that we see on September 15th, there was another charge on the account, a rather large one this time of $1,040. So we'll add that on to the current balance we're sitting at, which is 2080 plus the 1,040. If we add those two together, we get that the current balance at this point in the month would be $3,320. So that'll be the amount here. And again, we're going to multiply that by the number of days it was carried, which this one was carried from the 15th to the 28th. Again, you can either count it out. In this case, we can subtract those two and we'll get 13. And then we have to be careful with this next step because the balance is going to change again on September 28th. There is a, as it says, payment received of $395. Now, with a credit card, if payment is received, that means that a balance or some money is being paid towards the balance on the card. And what that does is it actually decreases the amount that is owed, right? It's going to take the total balance and lower it. So in this case, instead of adding that $395, we're now going to subtract that from the current balance on the account. And if we do that, what we end up with is that the new balance of the account as of September 28th would be $2,925. So we're going to go ahead and add that and then multiply that by the number of days that that balance was carried. And again, we need to be careful here because we see it's from the 28th to the 30th. You may think, well, we can just subtract those and it would be 2 days. However, that would mean that the balance is only carried for the 28th and the 29th. But notice that them telling us that, or giving us a September 30th, the balance didn't actually change, right? There's no amount over here. That's just the end of the month, which tells us that the month is going to end having that balance of $2,925, which means that that balance is held for 3 days then. We can also count that out again on your fingers if you want. The balance is carried the 28th, the 29th, as well as the 30th. So that's 3 days. And so now in essence, with this calculation you see here, we have added up all of the balances, the daily balances for all of September. So now what we want to do, so I'm going to write this out symbolically before we do it, is divide by the number of days in September. And we can see that since September starts on the 1st, ends on the 30th, that would be 30 days. So we'll divide this whole thing here by 30. And before we do, one way we can check that we haven't made any mistakes yet is to take all these number of days and add those up and make sure they add up to the total number of days in the month. So if we do 2 plus 8 plus 4 plus 13 plus 3, that does in fact add up to 30. So that is good. So if we do that division now, we find that the average daily balance for this statement for the month of September is $2,496.17. Okay, now we're going to be careful. That is not the ending balance for the month, right? In fact, that's lower than the ending balance of the month. Remember up here, final balance for the whole month was that $2,925. This number here, this average daily balance, what that's going to be useful for is helping us find the interest that we owe on this money we spent on the credit card. So let's go ahead and look at how we do that. So to find the interest due for the month, we first of all need that number we're just looking at, the average daily balance. I'm going to shorthand that with ADB. So our average daily balance from the month is $2,496.17. We also need our monthly interest rate. And to do this, to calculate this, we're going to have to do a little bit of work. And to find it, what we're first going to do is look up above and find our APR. And notice that that's given here. Our APR interest rate is 20%. And remember that that is for a full year. The APR is for a full year. So we want to convert that into a monthly interest rate. So the way we can do that is take it to 20%. Since we want to divide it up for a month and it covers the whole year, we'll go ahead and take it and divide it by 12, since there are 12 months in the year. If we do that, what we get is that our monthly interest rate is 1.7%, which as a decimal comes out to be 0.017. Okay. So with that information in mind, then to find our amount of interest, this is where the average daily balance comes in. We're going to calculate the amount of interest based on the average daily balance. So we first just need to find 1.7% of 2,496.17. The way we do that is we multiply the 2,496.17 times 0.017. And when we do that, we end up with the interest rate, or the amount of interest, excuse me, for the month ends up as $41.98. So that's how much interest we will owe for our charges or our balances from the month of September. And with that information, then we can now determine the total balance that we're going to owe per our statement at the end of the month. And to do that, we need two different numbers. We first need that amount of interest that we just calculated, because that's going to be charged based on the average daily balance. So again, that number was $41.98. And then we also need the ending balance for the month. And notice that I'm not going to use the average daily balance here. We're going to use the ending balance, which if I go back a couple slides, remember that was this number here, this 2,925. So we need that number, 2,925. And to find the total that we still owe, we'll take that ending balance, add on the interest, and we find that what we owe on our statement that needs to be paid back is the $2,966.98. Okay, and so when we get our next statement for the following month, or when it comes to us based on these charges, that's what we'll be told we still need to pay back. Now, the way a credit card works is typically you're not required to pay back the entire total balance due at the end of each month. A credit card acts like a loan where you're lent money, and then you can pay it back in installments over time. However, what can be tricky about that is that the credit card interest rates are often very high, and you can also often continue to spend money on your credit card as you are paying back previous balances, which sometimes can add up to a lot of money. But regardless, if you're not able to pay back the total amount at the end of the month, like say you don't have $2,966.98 to pay back, credit card companies often have a way to calculate the minimum amount they would expect you to pay back. And so let's take a look at an example of that. So let's say that, again, this is your credit card statement. These are your charges. And we're told here that your credit card company requires a $20 minimum payment or 1/36 of the amount due, whichever is higher at the end of the month. So what we want to figure out is what is the minimum monthly payment due for this month. So what we see here is there's two options for what we could pay back. We could either be paying back $20 or 1/36th of that amount due that we calculated. And again, the credit card companies are going to look for whichever one is higher. Well, we know $20 is $20, so that's the amount that it is. What we want to figure out next is what is 1/36th of the amount due. And a fairly simple, straightforward way to calculate that is just to take that amount due that we had, the 2,966.98, divide it by 36, because if you're finding 1/36th of something, that means you're finding if something is divided into 36 pieces, how big will each piece be? So we'll just take our 2,966.98 divided by 36. When we do that, we end up with an amount that is $82.42. And notice that's higher than the $20 minimum, which was the other option for what we might pay back. So therefore, this will be what we end up paying the credit card company, that minimum payment that they are going to require of us on the 2,966.98. Which you may look at that and think, huh, that seems like a good deal. Only $80 after I spent $3,000. But here's the problem. If you only pay back those $80, you're going to continue to gain interest at a very high rate on the amount you haven't paid back yet. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you for watching.